Evelyn was born in 1786. She is the third daughter to Edward and Elizabeth Chandler. She married Thomas in 1800 and took the surname Akiyama. In 1803 they had their first child, a little girl named Genevieve. In 1804 they had a son named Augustus. Then in 1808 they had another son, Johnathon. They are the Akiyamas. Thomas loved to perform and acted in the theatre for work. As Genevieve grew up, she had inherited the same passions. She would practice acting in the mirror when she wasn't picking on her little brother. Augustus had also grown with a particular passion himself. He had a love for playing piano. Evelyn spent a lot of her time knitting when she wasn't doing housework. Thomas and Evelyn always made time for each other when they could. Little Johnathon was growing fast. He liked to pull pranks. He especially loved messing with Augustus. As Genevieve aged, she never stopped acting in the mirror. Thomas coached her. She looked up to him. One night while performing a fight scene, Thomas fell off stage. He had a bad landing and couldn't survive his injuries. He passed at the age of 39 in 1817. The family was devastated. Time passed and the kids grew up. Romance blossomed between Genevieve and the young boy. His name was Dmitri Harbour. Things moved quick between them. It wasn't long before they were married. They moved into a small home together in 1820. Although Genevieve didn't get many roles, she never stopped acting around the house. Augustus never stopped playing the piano. He met a girl named Lindsay who loved to listen. She inspired him to compose music for her. It wasn't long before feelings were caught. Augustus soon proposed, to which Lindsay said yes. They were moved into a lovely home where Augustus continues to write music. Meanwhile at home, Evelyn had met someone new. His name was Franklin Crawford and he had also lost a spouse. The two were married and Franklin moved in. Her children didn't approve of her replacing their father, especially Johnathon, who still lived at home when Evelyn remarried. The marriage had definitely damaged their relationship. Besides the tension with his mother, he was often in his own world. But that changed when he met a girl. They moved in together where they are soon to be wed. In 1823, Evelyn and Franklin were expecting. They had a little girl named Victoria. Then, in 1825, they had a son named Nicholas. After his birth, she had become terribly ill and was bedridden. Unfortunately, her illness couldn't be cured and she never got better. She died that year and was buried beside Thomas. Franklin was left to mourn yet another spouse. Geneva Akiyama was born in 1803. She is Evelyn and Thomas Akiyama's first child. Growing up, she inherited her father's love for acting. Since it was his profession, he taught her everything he knew. Her father believed in her and promised to get her a spot on stage as the first female actor. Unfortunately, her father had passed away before getting to do so. When she was 17, she met a boy named Dmitri Harbour. They fell in love and were married in 1820. Genevieve never stopped acting despite never getting a role. In 1825, Genevieve was expecting. She gave birth to a little girl named Charlotte. Having her around gave Genevieve a new purpose outside of acting. She still found a way to practice when she could. She truly believed she would get hired. She even practiced monologues with Dmitri. In 1827, she was pregnant once more. She had another girl named Coraline. Genevieve and her husband were very busy parenting. Dmitri adored his little girls, while Genevieve wasn't as close with them. She picked on Charlotte the most. Charlotte never understood why her mother was so cruel. She always did what she was supposed to, and she was kind to everyone. Her father wasn't so mean. She wished her mother was the same. Genevieve was just angry with the world and took it out on her. Dmitri had soon had enough of her outburst. He told her she needed to stop wasting time on a silly dream and be a loving mother to her children. But Genevieve refused to listen. In fact, she only grew angrier. It was that rage that brought her to do the unthinkable. One night in 1835, she prepared dinner for the family. Charlotte helped set the table so they could eat. But once dinner was ready, she noticed something off about her food. She pretended she was ill, then excused herself from the table. Later, when Dmitri went into the room to tuck the girls in, he noticed she wasn't in her bed. He searched everywhere for her. But Charlotte was nowhere to be found. Augustus Akiyama was born in 1804. He is Evelyn and Thomas Akiyama's second child. As a child, Augustus became fascinated by music. He taught himself how to play the piano at just 10 years old. As the years went on, he started composing. In 1820, he met a girl named Lindsay, who was intrigued by his talents. The next year, they were married. Augustus went on to compose more symphonies. His most precious sheet of music was the one he was making for his wife. He planned on surprising her with it when it was finished. However, in 1832, Augustus's other symphonies became popular. He was asked to perform at many events and started to get a lot of recognition for his work. He even had a few admirers. With all that going on, he was too busy to finish his other projects. Still, he made sure to work on them whenever he was free. Lindsay wasn't allowed to accompany him when he worked, so she remained at home. But she was always entertained. Having a talented husband had its perks. Despite what she did when he wasn't home, Lindsay never made it seem like she was unfaithful. She still loved him all the same. Lindsay was infertile, so the two of them never had any children. That never bothered Augustus. He didn't want kids. In 1840, he finally finished composing his symphony in dedication to his wife. Lindsay loved it. The symphony brought them closer than they've ever been. Later in 1847, Lindsay had gotten seriously ill. Augustus tried to help her as much as he could, but her death was inevitable. She had eventually become too weak to stand on her feet. Augustus felt helpless watching her slowly die day by day. He stayed by her side until she passed away in 1848. After her burial, he received several visits from men who claimed to have had an affair with her. Augustus was enraged that people would make up such lies. No matter how many men claimed to pursue her, he never believed them. Augustus had a difficult time coping with Lindsay's death. He drank a lot. He continued to compose music and made history with his symphonies. He later died in 1858. He was buried beside his wife, who he believed was never unfaithful. Johnathon Akiyama was born in 1808. He is the third child of Evelyn and Thomas Akiyama. In 1823, he met a girl named Sarah. They fell in love and were married in 1828. The young couple were deeply in love. There wasn't a day they didn't show it. They soon discovered they were expecting. They couldn't wait to meet their bundle of joy. But something terrible had happened. Sarah had an emergency and had to be taken to the hospital. There it was announced that Sarah had a miscarriage. They were devastated at the loss. It changed things for a while. After some time, they started to feel a little better. They still had each other and they could always try for another. Next thing they knew, they were pregnant again. The expecting parents were once again excited to meet their new addition to the family. That was until they were yet again met with another loss. Johnathon was heartbroken to have lost another child. Worst of all, he felt bad that Sarah had to go through it again. It was much harder on her. She didn't speak for days. A few years had gone by. Sarah announced that she was pregnant once again. They immediately started preparing together. Although excited, Sarah was very worried about the state of her pregnancy. Johnathon did his best to reassure her, but he feared the same. They made sure to visit the doctor frequently to make sure Sarah and the baby were in good health. They did everything they could to meet their little one. As the months passed, they had lost all doubt in another miscarriage. With the due date getting closer and closer, they couldn't contain their excitement. They even set up the perfect nursery. Before they knew it, the baby was on the way. During the birth, Sarah had trouble pushing. Johnathon encouraged her to keep trying because the baby was almost out. Sarah fought through the pain and was able to give birth to a little girl named Joan. Unfortunately, she couldn't survive the aftermath. In 1834, Sarah had passed away in childbirth. She never got to meet their daughter. Johnathon was devastated to lose his wife, but grateful their baby was healthy. He barely got the chance to truly mourn the loss of Sarah because he was so busy parenting. Most nights were sleepless. Being with Joan helped him cope, but a part of him resented her for Sarah's death. He hated himself for feeling the way he did. It wasn't fair to Joan. It was just overwhelming to raise a child alone. But there were no alternatives. Despite what he was going through, he loved his daughter dearly. She had become the new light of his life. They had a lot of fun together. Joan was his best friend. Fatherhood had taught Johnathon a lot of things. There was always something new to learn, like how fast time flies. He also learned that his wife will always be a part of them. He saw her in Joan more and more each day. Victoria Crawford was born in 1823. She is Evelyn's fourth child and Franklin's first. After her mother's sudden death in 1825, Victoria and her brother Nicholas were left with their father. Franklin managed to take care of them for a while, but they were soon cared for by the house servant. Franklin was too busy with other things to care for them. Evelyn had died so early in their lives, the children couldn't comprehend her absence. As the years went on, the kids saw their father less and less. Their servant Mona had become their only guardian. Victoria and Nicholas were close with one another. She was very protective over her little brother. They were best friends. However, that changed in 1831. Nicholas had gotten sick. What started off as a cold became something much worse. Nicholas spent most days in his bed after the doctor revealed he could not be helped. Since he was too ill to get out of bed, Victoria had no choice but to play on her own. Eventually, Nicholas was so ill they could no longer share a room. They were completely separated from each other. Mona was there to comfort her, but a lot of her time was spent caring for Nicholas. Sometimes Victoria would sneak into his room to see him. She even brought him some toys to play with. Nicholas was grateful and played with it whenever he had the chance. Franklin was extremely stressed about his son's illness. He was tired of losing everyone he loved. A year passed and Nicholas's condition was only getting worse. Mona soothed him in his final moments. That was all she could do. Nicholas Crawford passed away in 1832 at 7 years old. Victoria couldn't believe he was gone. Franklin drank even more after his death. It was very hard on him. But all that drinking soon caught up to him. Victoria had to watch illness take another loved one. She had never seen her father cry before then. Franklin tried to stay positive with her. He didn't want her to see him in that state. But she knew what was next for him. Mona helped as much as she could. However, Franklin preferred she keep Victoria's spirits up. She wanted to find a cure for the diseases that took her mother, brother, and soon her father. In the midst of her research, Franklin had passed away. In 1830, Franklin passed at the age of 57. With Franklin gone, the estate and the enslaved were put up for sale. Since her older siblings wanted nothing to do with her, Victoria had no one. Mona said her farewells before Victoria was taken away. She was brought to an orphan home for girls. Life at the orphanage was very different from what she was used to. Their rules were strict. Misbehavior was never tolerated. The caretakers there were kind, for the most part. Victoria still wanted to find cures for diseases. As she got older, she studied more and more. But she was getting to the age where she could no longer stay at the orphanage. At 15, girls were forced into homes to serve. So the day before her 15th birthday, she ran away. She ran for a while before she was exhausted. She collapsed just outside a manor. Luckily for her, the owner was kind. Victoria later woke up in a very nice room. She found the man who helped her and introduced herself. The man's name was Gustav Morty, and he was a vampire. Victoria apologized for her mishaps and explained her situation. Gustav reassured her that she could stay for as long as she wanted. So, she went along and made herself at home in this strange new place. Victoria continued to research medicine as time went on. Gustav noticed her intelligence and admired her ambition. He bought her all the material she needed for her research. With his support, she was able to create a cough syrup to reduce a common cold. Eventually, the pair started to fall for each other. In 1841, Gustav and Victoria were married. A few years later, Victoria was pregnant. She gave birth to a little girl named Isabella in 1845. Victoria's cough syrup helped thousands and became the #1 medicine used in the country.